The Jùcar is the second most important river of the Mediterranean basin. With a course of nearly 500 kilometers and with its little more than 1,000 cubic hectometers per year, it forms a fountain of life and wealth for the territories of its basin. Its volume, coming from its numerous streams which form the headwaters in the mountainous area of Cuenca, is enriched by the contributions from the river Cabriel and in a lesser proportion by the rivers Cenient, Magro and Albaida. But historically it's been the underground waters, principally from the aquifer of the Mancha Oriental, which have guaranteed the stability of its course and the good use of its resources, including in the low water periods. On its journey from the Castellón and Manchega highlands to the Mediterranean, the river must save considerable geographical unevenness, which has been made the most of since the end of the last century, to obtain electric energy. Cascades of water like those of El Picazo near the Alarcón reservoir, whose storage chamber diverts the waters to the Tajo Segura aqueduct. In the years 1989 and 1999, the hydroelectric plants of Cortés, which were of a conventional type, were brought into service, and La Muela, of pure pumping, becoming the principal hydroelectric group of the Valencian community, which, with its clean energy production, avoids the consumption of 155 tons of fuel or of 255 tons of carbon, eliminating with it emissions to the atmosphere. But traditionally, the principal use of the river has been made in one of the most important zones of irrigation land in our country, the Ribera del Jùcar of Valencia. These historical irrigation lands have been using the waters of the river Jùcar since the 13th century. The first irrigation channel to be formed was the Royal Ditch of Alcira in the 13th century. Nowadays it's the Royal Ditch of the Jùcar, with a surface of irrigation of 22,000 hectares. After comes the Royal Ditches of Escalona, with 2,500 hectares, and Carcagente with 1,800 hectares. And there are the irrigation channels of Sueca with 8,900, Culiera with 4,500, and Cuatro Pueblos with 1,300 hectares. In total, 41,000 hectares of irrigation. The plants are situated in the middle and upper part of the river, and the irrigated lands in the low course. For this, both irrigation and electricity production are perfectly compatible. The waters of the river Jùcar generate a double richness. Firstly, they produce electricity, and after, they water the fertile lands of the Ribera del Jùcar. When there wasn't regulation in the river, they had to take maximum advantage of the abundance from the Jùcar, even in moments of floods. For this, the infrastructures of the traditional irrigation lands were also conceived to make the most of the waters of the Jùcar. Nowadays, the infrastructures are larger than is deemed necessary. In 1941, the traditional irrigation lands, facing the insufficiency of resources in the drought periods, in spite of having all the resources of the Jùcar, united all the existing industrial developments in the river to construct the Alarcón Dam, paying entirely the cost of the construction. It was the first and most important construction of water regulation in the river Jùcar. With this regulation, practically 100% of the irrigation was guaranteed in summer in the irrigation lands on the banks of the Jùcar of Valencia. The industrial users also made an important improvement in their efficiency, now that they could use all the waters of the river and moreover with the desired volume at the right moment. The use of all the waters of the Jùcar, with the guarantee that the Alarcón Dam gave, was an ideal situation for the traditional irrigation lands. This situation started deteriorating from 1970 with the appearance of more water users. the exploitation of the subterranean waters of the Mancha Oriental starts. In practically 2 decades, the 70s and principally the 80s, the irrigated lands were about 100,000 hectares, with subterranean waters coming from the said aquifer. Another user of the Jùcar's waters that appeared in the 70s is the Jùcar-Túria channel. This waterway was conceived to guarantee the water supply of Valencia and to irrigate around 32,000 hectares in this province. As the flowing waters of the river Jùcar and Cabriel are given totally to the traditional irrigation lands, the reservoir of Contreras was constructed to satisfy these new demands. In the most recent years, exceptional transfers of volume have been approved from regulated volumes in the Aracon reservoir to serve the supply to the Marina Baja and Alicante. Besides these new uses, the hydroelectric plan of the Jùcar provides the supply of Albacete and Sagunto, with surface waters from the river and also the transfer from the Jùcar, Vinalopó, Marinas. The environmental needs of the river Jùcar and its setting shouldn't be kept out of sight either. The natural park of the Albufera of Valencia, which has been kept as a wet zone, deserves a special mention, thanks to the water left over from the irrigation lands of the royal ditch of the Jùcar and of the users of the community of Sueca. The hydrologic plan of the Jùcar gives the traditional irrigation lands an annual volume of 725 cubic hectares. This amount is made necessary given to the age of the infrastructures designed to take advantage of the rise of the river and the necessity of the urgent rehabilitation. The appearance of new users has caused a decrease in the resources available for the traditional irrigation lands. This situation obliges a modification in the infrastructure of the actual users. With the modernization of the irrigation lands, a clear benefit is produced for the new users that are going to be able to have more resources available. You can't insist that the actual users have additional building costs from which they are going to benefit other users receiving resources that weren't available before. However, it seems sensible that the administration takes charge of the modernization costs of the traditional irrigation lands because they are going to produce a benefit for third persons and for all the society. The modernization of the infrastructures of the irrigation of the traditional irrigation lands is orientated in 3 directions, depending on the characteristics of the crops. Changing to drip feed is the object of the major part of the waterable area where the cultivation of citrics and fruit trees predominate. An improvement in the infrastructures of irrigation of the rice fields. About 11,000 hectares of rice fields exist, the majority inside the natural park of the Albufera, which requires special treatment and some improvements in its system of irrigation and drainage. Improvement in the remainder of the infrastructures. In the areas that aren't rice fields, where the transformation to irrigation by drip isn't contemplated, improvement of the infrastructures are foreseen by means of the linings of ditches and the installations of management and control systems. The modernization of the historical irrigation lands will hopefully make an improvement in the quality of life for the farmers and a reduction of their exploitation costs.